The last time I was here at the Quorum, Saloni reminded me that Asim Munir was having lunch with Donald Trump. And now that I'm back, Asim Munir is back at the White House, along with, as Ambassador Ajay Bisaria earlier described it to me this evening, his assistant, Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif. I promise you that's merely a coincidence. I have nothing to do with it, nor does Quorum. But it makes for an interesting start point. Look at where we are right now. If you were to look at everything that is happening vis-a-vis the United States of America, we have the tariffs, 25% of which are meant to be penalty, quote unquote, for India purchasing oil from Russia. We have a shift in the H-1b visa policy. We have reports of 100% tariff in pharma that is actually directly going to hit a number of Indian companies. And we have Trump's courting of Pakistan. Some are calling it a pivot to Pakistan of the kind that we haven't actually seen since the 1970s. So I just am trying to be a little provocative there as well. But that is, people are wondering what's actually going on. I'll start with you, Ambassador Sood. What is going on? How do we explain? Trump doesn't love, he deals. What's he hoping to get from Pakistan?
Thank you, Barkha. I guess this is the price one has to pay because since I was told that I'm the dinosaur in the group.
Correct, we have to start with the dinosaurs.
But I think there was a kind of, there's a fundamental mistake that we made in Trump's second term. Mm-hmm. I think that we thought we'd done well in the first term, and so there were good vibes from that. And we thought we had started off well on the second term by having a visit by Prime Minister Modi in February itself, where he announced that we'll begin negotiations on trade and things like that. But this was based on a couple of assumptions. One, as I said, that there was a good feeling that was still there. Second, it was that the fundamental strategic drivers behind India-US relationship that had been in evidence during Trump's first term, during the Biden term, before that during the Obama term, before that during the Bush years, and so on. So which had been there for 20, 25 years, were intact. Because it involved the Pentagon, it involved the State Department, it involved the White House, it involved everybody else, the various agencies. And the third thing was that, if you recall, a lot was made during Trump's first term about the Howdy Modi in Houston, about the Namaste Trump in Ahmedabad, and all of that. And we thought that the diaspora was batting for us very strongly. All these three assumptions got challenged. First, you saw that in the second term, Trump no longer had the minders, the elders in the room, so to say. So he had no holdbacks, unlike the generals and so on.
So no moderating influences.
Yeah. The second, I think we found quite quickly that whatever expectations there were from the diaspora, we should have kept them muted. And the third, which is the strategic drivers behind the relationship. Now there, we have to come to terms with Trump's worldview. And Trump's worldview, as you said, Barkha, is increasingly transactional. I mean, he's not interested in great power politics. He is not interested in geopolitics in that sense. Because in that sense, the US had accepted a core principle that a stronger, more economically developed India would be useful in an Asian balance of power. And from that point of view, would provide a balancing effect as far as China is concerned. Now, this was there right from Bush, and in fact, even to an extent in the final years of Clinton administration, when Jaswant Singh strobed Talbot talks, because we saw the role that the US played in ending the Kargil war. Trump, zero interest in this. He looks at things in terms of trade, he looks at MAGA and all of that. And if he imposed 100% tariffs or 140% tariffs on China, he was equally happy doing it on India with 50%, or he was equally comfortable doing it with EU or with Japan or with South Korea. So he doesn't make a difference between what was earlier seen as an ally, a partner, or a long-term geostrategic peer rival, which was the description of China in Trump's first term.
I mean, he didn't go after China in the beginning, though China was buying more Russian oil. It's only now that he's...
Well, but he never looked at it as a geostrategic peer rival, whereas in his first term, his national security strategy review calls China a peer rival. Now, if that is taken out, then what is left with the India-US relationship? I mean, he keeps saying, Modi, my good friend Modi. But then, if you're a good friend, then the least you can do is nominate the guy for the Nobel. I mean, you don't even do that. What kind of a good friend are you? So that's where we are.
So, Ambassador Arun Singh, let's pick up on the last point first, right? Pakistan's Prime Minister makes an absolutely cringeworthy speech at the United Nations. We go through this sort of, this fencing match between our countries at the United Nations every year. That in itself is not new. But for Shehbaz Sharif to actually stand up and say that, Trump, to reiterate the Nobel Prize, to talk about how Trump not intervened in Operation Sindoor, there would have been a catastrophe, and as happens every year, a very fine young diplomat gets up, shuts him down, says Pakistan's military actually pleaded for a cessation in hostilities. This India-Pakistan face-off, suddenly it feels like the Americans are in the middle of it and have inserted themselves in the middle of it, and there seems to be nothing we can do about it overtly except for saying we do not accept third-party mediation. How do you read it?
So I think building on what Rakesh had said, I very briefly try and sort of elaborate on why the US-Pakistan relationship seems at a good place now, and why are we getting a sense that the US-India relationship is at a difficult place. Now, in terms of the US-Pakistan, first we have to always keep in mind that US relationship with Pakistan will be based on US perception of its own interest. Not because they want to help India or create challenges for India, it's how they define that interest. Even at times when the relationship was very difficult, because they felt that Pakistan was helping the Taliban, which was killing US soldiers, they still felt they needed to have a relationship with Pakistan for two main reasons. One, Pakistan is a country which has a large number of nuclear weapons. So they want access to the leadership of the country that has a large number of nuclear weapons. Second, large part of terrorism-related challenge to the West, including the US, is sourced from the Afghanistan-Pakistan region. So they again want access to the leadership of the country that can deal with this region. And then even now, although they have withdrawn from Afghanistan, they fly drones over Afghanistan every now and then. And the drones can reach Afghanistan only by flying over Pakistan, can't go over Iran. So they need access to the leadership of Pakistan, so that's in the general sense. Now, at this particular moment, additional dimensions have come in. Rakesh also mentioned that Trump is very, very transactional. So, and many people have pointed out that much of his policy is driven by what is benefiting him, his organization, the family. And so the Pakistanis have invested some money in the World Liberty Financial, with the cryptocurrency firm run by Eric Trump and Zach Witkoff, who is the son of Steve Witkoff, who is the special envoy of Donald Trump. So that has got them some access in the Trump circuit. And there are many other reports which are out there in public domain where there is a Pakistan linkage to some of the businesses being run out of the Trump organization. So we have to keep that dimension in mind. So because of that, at this stage, the relationship is very different from what we had seen in the first Trump term. In the first term, if you recall, in July 2017, Trump had come out with a South Asia strategy and basically saying that Pakistan has been hoodwinking the US, you have to take strong action, India do more in Afghanistan. And 1st January 2018, he had tweeted at 3 a.m., stop all aid to Pakistan. And then in July 2019, because then he needed Pakistan's help to try and get an agreement with the Taliban because he had to withdraw. July 2019, he invites Imran Khan to the White House and says in response to a planted question that I'm ready to mediate on Kashmir. And he went on to say that the Indian Prime Minister has asked me to mediate on Kashmir, which simply can't be true. And the Indian Foreign Minister had to make a statement that there's no truth to what the President has said. So we have to keep in mind that President Trump's articulation of position of policy is not necessarily always based on facts. So that's one dimension. Now, in that background, when we look at the problems in the US-India relationship, at the moment, we are in a problematic situation because 4 elements of President Trump's domestic politics or personal politics, not because of any structural issue between US and India. First, as Rakesh mentioned, he wants the Nobel Peace Prize. And he believes that making a claim to resolving the India-Pakistan crisis of conflict in May, would enhance his claim to the Nobel Peace Prize. And the Pakistanis have realized that this works very well. So they have nominated him, and then Shehbaz Sharif talks about it also, gets him special access in the White House. So they will play that because Pakistan has always tried to involve a third party in India-Pakistan issues. And India's position has been very clear, especially since 1972, since the Simla Agreement, that we will never accept a third party role in India-Pakistan issues because in the 50s and 60s, the third party did play a role. US and UK did mediate between India and Pakistan, including on Kashmir, and we found that the mediation was biased because they were looking at issues from the perspective of their own interest. And so you don't want a third party coming in. So that is India's firm position. So when Trump made the claim, clearly the Indian Prime Minister could not support that claim. So I think that introduced an element of friction in the relationship. Then if you recall, on June 17, Trump spoke to the Indian Prime Minister when the Prime Minister was in Canada. Trump had come back from the G7 and invited him to visit the White House the next day.
While Munir was in town.
Next day, the Munir was invited to the White House. So obviously, Trump was trying to ambush the Indian Prime Minister with a photo op along with Pakistan Army Chief and say that he had brought them together. And of course, the Indian Prime Minister didn't accept that invitation to go there. So it adds to that. Now, the second element is that Trump has been trying to show that he's getting trade agreements where US has unilateral benefits and that he's not giving in anything. His partners are making unilateral concessions. For example, Indonesia and Vietnam opened up their markets, get 20% tariff. Japan opens up markets, promises $550 billion of investment. Trump says this is now US sovereign wealth fund. I will decide where the money goes, and 90% of the profits generated will go to the US Treasury. And then imposes 15% tariffs. Similarly, Europe promises $750 billion of energy purchase, $600 billion of investment, and you get 15% tariff. Now, in this period, and Rakesh mentioned that Indian Prime Minister was there in February, trade discussions started. And from all reports, by early July, we had a good draft of a trade agreement, balanced, benefits for both sides, ready. But when it goes up to Trump in July, and he's already irritated a bit, and he says, this is a balanced trade agreement, where is the unilateral benefit for me? So he doesn't accept it. 25% tariffs on India. Now, at that very stage, he's coming under criticism, heavily in the United States, that you have done nothing to resolve the Russia-Ukraine conflict. He had said he'll resolve it in 24 hours. And he has taken no action against Russia. Even till now, in his second term, there is no action against Russia that he has taken, for whatever reason, either because he wants to have continued access, continued dialogue, whatever it is. So when he came in for criticism, doesn't want to take actions against Russia, cannot take action against China, because China has shown countervailing power by doing export control on various items. Plus, when he raised tariffs to 100%, and Chinese raised tariffs, the bond market got destabilized. So he walked back from that. So you can't raise tariffs on China, can't do it, so hit India. So we get 25% more tariff, 50%. Then the final thing that's happening is that a lot of people in the US say that he does not have the authority to impose tariffs. It lies with the US Congress. And the matter has gone to courts. At two levels, courts have ruled that he doesn't have the authority. Yeah. So he's now with the Supreme Court. In a filing in the Supreme Court, they have said that he has levied tariffs on India to resolve the Russia-Ukraine conflict. So he's trying to show that he's using tariffs for foreign policy purposes where he has a mandate. So this is the vortex of situation we found ourselves in, that at the moment, there is a certain advantage he sees in playing up the Pakistan relationship, including maybe to put pressure on us.
Yeah.
And the India-US relationship is in a difficult phase. But I'm confident that given some of the convergences in our interest, we will come out of this situation.
Okay, I have more questions on that, but let me bring in Ambassador Javed Ashraf. One dimension of this Pakistan factor, if it can be called that, is the recent military pact between Pakistan and Saudi Arabia. It's been compared to a NATO-style alliance because of Article 5 of NATO, which says an attack on, like NATO, an attack on one country will be considered an attack on both. Now, experts have pointed out that it's highly unlikely that Saudi Arabia will ever, send troops against India in any kind of Operation Sindoor-type conflict. But there are two concerns here. One, it's a kind of legitimacy that Pakistan is accorded. Pakistan gets to sit at a table in New York with Trump talking about the situation in West Asia. Two, there are those like Hussein Haqqani, Pakistan's former ambassador to America, who says, hey, this allows Pakistan to buy American weapons using Saudi funds. I just want to understand from you how much of a concern this is, this new 15 seconds of fame that Pakistan has.
Well, Barkha, thank you very much. And first of all, it's a great pleasure to join very eminent and distinguished seniors with whom I've had the opportunity to work on some very consequential projects in the Ministry of External Affairs. Also, thanks to Quorum for inviting me. A metaphor of Gurgaon with the private fantasy and public nightmare. So, but I could not have, I'll be leaving Gurgaon soon, so I couldn't have left without actually coming to...
You know that those 4 words would also describe Donald Trump.
Yes.
Private fantasy and public nightmare.
But Barkha, before I get to that question, I'd like to, first of all, speak in a little more structural terms about the India-US relations, on which I worked for 15 years. And also to your first point about Pakistan relationship of the kind of pivot that hasn't been since the 1970s. I think, first of all, I'm surprised that we are surprised. One, with Pakistan, there have been many U-turns in US-Pakistan relations that do not end well for either side. First of all, remember, for 50 years, they were actual formal allies. They fought in the trenches together. There are deep institutional linkages between the military on both sides. I can tell you anecdotally that when Prime Minister Vajpayee invited General transitioning into President Musharraf for Agra. I was in Washington, D.C. when we went and met Richard Armitage, who was the Deputy Secretary of State. He said, how can you invite him? Can you look him in the eye and trust him? I have been in trenches with him. The point I'm making is that there are very deep institutional relationship. In May, I'll give you one example of how these U-turns work. May 11, 2001, Richard Armitage comes to Delhi, Seoul, and Tokyo to explain President Bush's new strategic framework. And at that time, coming out of RCR, then RCR, now LKM, he almost alluded to the possibility of Pakistan being declared a rogue state, right? 9/11 happens. And then the first thing the Americans told us, don't piggyback us. And don't use us to go after Pakistan. December 2001, they gave us a formal démarche saying, do not open consulates in Jalalabad and Herat, Mazar-e-Sharif, because it is upsetting Pakistan. I still keep a copy of that diplomatic note as a reminder of follies of diplomacy. And so you can see that sort of U-turns that take place for purely tactical reasons. One of the reasons is this, and I'll come to why there are structural problems. American decision-making is always sequential and linear. They deal with one short-term problem without bothering about the consequences of what they might have to deal with later. So at that point of time, they told us, stay out of it. The bargain President Musharraf stuck with the US was this: you can go after Al-Qaeda because they hurt you. I will keep Taliban under check because they were not directly complicit in the attack. But I will do nothing to Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed. Americans accepted that bargain at that point of time. The same thing, okay, then you see every year progressively they are being taken for a ride. And then they keep giving more money. Then Ambassador Arun Singh was DCM, I was there. I remember working the Congress on the Kerry-Berman-Lugar bill, on which we tried and got about 20 conditions imposed. The State Department directly intervened with the Senate and got 10 of them removed, saying that it's going to irritate Ashfaq Kyani. They were, of course, in love with Ashfaq Kyani at that point of time because then the logic was so superficial that he drinks whiskey, he smokes cigar, and that he has a dog at home, so he must be a moderate Muslim, and who can then work with us. They forgot about that he's running a Pakistan military. So those U-turns will happen, and usually in the first part of any new administration, particularly one which has absolutely, as both ambassadors have pointed out, no wise, experienced people in geopolitics, but MAGA ideologues running it, except perhaps Marco Rubio, that there is a seduction of Pakistan, and that there is a feeling that they can get what they want out of it. Remember, every SHO that we know, Thanedar, usually needs one rogue in his locality.
The local gunda.
The local gunda who is allowed to continue to do a few messing around, but is helpful to the SHO.
Correct.
When it comes to it. So they pick up, see, remember March, in the State of the Union address, President Trump mentions Pakistan's counter-terrorism cooperation. Second, I have never seen United States abandon the state of Pakistan. They may take cosmetic steps of banning LET and JEM, but directly implicating Pakistan. I pointed this out in 2003 when there was a direct barter between Pakistan and North Korea, Shaheen missiles for uranium, and Nodong missile for uranium enrichment. The United States used the most disingenuous way of sanctioning Pakistan, which was toothless, but used the Full Arms Export Control Act, Section 73, to target North Korea, and therefore North Korea was separated from Pakistan. So this will go on. The state of Pakistan, for the reasons that have been pointed out, is extremely important. One more thing. It isn't just about terrorism or a nuclear armed state which has a gun to its head. It is also a deep belief in the United States that it is possible to find a way to get at least some basic rights vis-a-vis China. Why? Because in the event of a conflict, today the United States only has a Pacific front. It doesn't have a Western front. And, so Central Asia is largely out of bounds, Iran is out of bounds, and there is always that need to remain engaged. But we should never be surprised about these U-turns, but we have in the past navigated past these, including when Obama thought in his interview to Ron Klein in Time magazine, he said the road to peace in Kabul lies through Islamabad and Delhi. So Richard Holbrooke was supposed to be a special envoy. Ambassador Singh was also there at that time. We told them that it's a kiss of death if you get into this, so he was kept out. We will get past all of this also because I think that hyphenation is really something that is either in our minds. But on the United States-India relations in January, when we were the most triumphantly welcoming President Trump's election, and when now it hasn't aged well, when the minister said that the world may be nervous about President Trump, but India is not among those countries. Now, if you see, as he's pointed out, his first term, there were enough clues in that. One, his proclivity towards peacemaking and mediation came through. Second, he was, I think, had declared us as a tariff king even then. Third, the pressure on Russia was very strong. And I am sorry to say that we also agreed to scale back oil purchases from Iran as a policy decision, not as a market decision. That gives you the impression that a country is amenable to pressure. We didn't do that in 2012, I have to say this, when Iran was declared the primary jurisdiction of money laundering concern. We insisted and we used UCO Bank to ring fence. And UCO Bank was the source through which we were importing. And then CAATSA sanctions. There was a lot of pressure on us. And there was a one-time waiver for this S-400. I mean, I was there in that meeting with General Mattis, and then Defense Minister, and he was insistent on it. So the signals were there. But here is a set of structural problems. Because we have been so caught up in the rhetoric of the defining partnership of the 21st century on both sides, and as one of the speechwriters, I've been guilty of that also, that the reality and the rhetoric seems to get blurred. And here are the things. One is that the geopolitical order in which India-US relations is transformed no longer exists. Russia-US relations were not as fraught as they are. China was not the big power that it is today. Second, we had this belief in a sui generis relationship. That is, we are aligned on some issues, we are not allies. And that there will be tension and limitations between a unipolar United States with a neat dichotomy between allies and adversaries, and a multipolarly inclined India with a deep sense of strategic autonomy. But the belief was that we can navigate past all these differences because of the larger shared vision of international order. That's centered around China. Okay. Now we come to a point, and so therefore we over-signaled on Quad without settling the bilateral terms of our relationship, which is now coming to haunt us. And we then have now a president who is actually not an aberration, he's a culmination of a process that began in the United States in 2008. And it has gone, and we can discuss this in a subsequent thing. So he is economic, not geopolitical. So the classic US policy has been to prevent the rise of another global hegemon that challenges its hegemonic position. For Trump, it is the economic consequences of China's rise that bothers him the most. You've never heard him speak about the indispensability of American leadership in upholding the international order. He doesn't get into all of that. It's to make America great again, even if it means I trample over everyone. The strategy is different. Classical American strategy is as follows: direct containment of China through technology, finance, trade measures, but also build an informal and formal alliance of partners who could act as the countervailing force. So Japan, Korea, Australia, New Zealand, and India. Right? For Trump, it is, this pillar doesn't exist. It is, I'll deal directly with China. So salience of the partners in dealing with this, and they have come down, and therefore the capacity of or the tolerance for differences with the United States will continue to decrease. That leads to a very, very serious question which we have to think through. So you've seen that the two countries that get the first letters on trade are Korea and Japan. 75 years of treaty alliance. Australia, 368 billion Australian dollars committed to AUKUS. They don't know where it is going, right? We, of course, you've already heard what we have been going through. Then the question that arises about Indo-Pacific, which is the fulcrum, because we've made the India-US relationship the cornerstone of our security architecture in the Indo-Pacific. Will he continue to treat security as a public good in the Indo-Pacific? Or will he retreat to the United States' traditional Western periphery in the Pacific, by the way, which has been there since 1783.
Yeah.
So this question will mean that you would end up maybe down the line in a situation from what we call China +1 to in US +1. And hedging is happening. They walked out of TPP. What happened? CPTPP came up. Somebody else took the lead, and today CPTPP, UK is joining, EU wants to join. Can you imagine this new trade order that is built without the United States? Yeah. So the US has a fundamental problem since 2008, which is that it no longer finds the global order and the institutions that it was the architect of either attractive or useful to it. And therefore this retreat started from President Obama, and it is continuing over a period of time. So this is something we have to understand. As far as the, sorry, I just got a bit too detailed into this, but on the Saudi Pakistan, first, of course, that we deluded ourselves into believing that Pakistan is isolated. If you tell yourself repeatedly that someone is isolated, doesn't make that person isolated. I mean, that is, it has an ebb and flow. Pakistan's always maintained its relationships below the radar. We started taking pride in the fact that our discussions had almost left out Pakistan, which is an anomaly. If you don't discuss your own neighbors, then there's something fundamentally wrong with us. Then comes, see, here there is a very interesting aside. First of all, and here's quite an expert on disarmament. You have, forget about the substance of it, there is a symbolism. But that relationship in an informal way has been there with Gulf countries for a very long time. There's no question about it. When this agreement is done, it also, unfortunately for Saudi Arabia, takes one very important demand that they have had on the United States away. The US will say, now you have a mutual defense pact with a nuclear weapons power. Why do you need enrichment technology? Now you just stay out of this. As far as the capacity of Pakistan to provide extended deterrence or nuclear umbrella, as that comment, it's a highly, highly debatable issue, and there's a whole lot of technical questions on command and control, delivery systems, decision-making, etc., that will not come into play. The reality is that their first use will be against Houthis. Yemen is a country which the House of Saud has not been able to pacify for 200 years. On the debris of the Ottoman Empire, when the House of Saud conquered the peninsula, Hijaz, except for where the Hashemites were sent off to Transjordania and the British kept the Emirates, Yemen was the only country they could not subdue. They continue to do that. They will need those forces to try and pacify it, because Houthis represent a serious institutional threat to the House of Saud for a number of reasons, including the fact that they have very strong links with Iran.
Yeah.
So I would say that, you know, we, as far our own security interests are concerned, perhaps not of great consequence. The fact that Pakistan today is back a bit in the eyes. And I will tell you one more reason why this is happening. This is the global public perception of Operation Sindoor. There is, no matter what we say, the way the narrative was built, the way we were able to, strategic communication, whatever it was, the initial perception that has shaped us that Pakistan was able to match India. And therefore the mediation happened. So when they look at India and when they look at Pakistan, they'll start looking at it as a credible military force that can stand up to a country like India. Contrary-wise, it will raise questions about your ability to counter China when people start feeling that maybe perhaps India was not a, maybe it was a 7-6 tiebreak, not a 6-love, 6-2, which they would have expected in tennis parlance from an India-Pakistan. And it isn't, nothing, I'm not saying this is reality, but this is the perception. And a perception that we started trying to change way too late when it was already formed.
Okay, there's a lot of meat in there, and I'm unsure which to pick up first. I'll come to you, Master Sood, and then to Master Singh. Picking up on this sort of point that this started before Trump and we didn't see the signs. If you remember, sort of as Ambassador Javed Ashraf mentioned, there was a pushback on what Obama was trying to do, this idea that America was, you know, there was the road sort of to peace for Kabul went through Islamabad and Delhi. Today we have Trump sending an envoy to India who is also going to be the envoy for all of South Asia and Central Asia. And I've heard the argument that because he's going to be based in Delhi, that's an acknowledgement of Delhi as the fulcrum. But it is exactly the sort of stuff we pushed back against earlier, right? So I want to start there. And if you also want to join the dots with what Ambassador Ashraf argued, is a kind of situation where your military did really well, but your narrative didn't on Op Sindoor, and how much that has set us back, if you agree with that argument.
Well, I agree. I mean, with the appointment of Gore, Sajeev Gore, as the ambassador designate for India and the special envoy for South and Central Asia, we are certainly entering into a new territory. And it only means that if you can't convince India, if as and when he comes here after his confirmation, if you can't convince him that his principal client is Delhi, then I'm afraid we will have a very, very difficult relationship, both with him. He'll find it a difficult place to do work in, for sure. I mean, and it will have an adverse impact since he does have the presidency here. If he finds it difficult to work here, to get connections, to get his appointments and things like that, then surely it will get back to White House, and that is not going to help the relationship. But then this is part of how, I mean, both Arun and Javed agreed that Trump doesn't see things from a geopolitical sense, which is what I mentioned, which is why he makes no difference. It makes no difference to him when he imposes tariffs on allies like the Europeans or the Japanese or the South Koreans, or on partners like India, or on a peer strategic rival like China, because he no longer sees China through that strategic rival eyes. The second problem, and I think I'll bring in a slightly different issue with regard to the Op Sindoor and narrative and so on. And let me add something to this. I think what we have seen is, we have seen too much of a focus on foreign policy as driven by personalities. It's, you know, all of us, in fact, Arun as well as Javed, and all three of us have worked on India-US relationship right from, I mean, I started in the 1990s. The first meeting was between Prime Minister Narasimha Rao and George Bush Sr. on 31st of January 1992 in New York, on the margins of the UN Security Council, the first UN Security Council summit. And all of us have been involved with it. I think the most recently was Arun when he was ambassador in Washington. So, and we've had good relationships. I mean, Vajpayee had a good relationship with Clinton. Bush had a good relationship first with Vajpayee, although he used to say, "Baat kam karte hain." But he also had a very respectful approach to Dr. Manmohan Singh. Trump had his chai pe charcha with Obama and all of that. And
you mean Modi had his chai pe charcha with Obama?
Yeah, with Modi had his chai pe charcha with Obama. And then, of course, even with Trump. But then, with Modi, we've now seen a growing thing, whether it is with the Saudis, whether it is with or even when it was with the Chinese, when Xi Jinping came here, and there were these pictures of the two of them in Sabarmati and all of that. So there is a personalized way of looking at relationships. And I'm afraid media tends to take that and, you attribute it to, look, what a great friendship. I mean, this is the success of foreign policy kind of thing. But actually, it is driven much more by hard work that goes behind it. So...
I mean, that's true for us. It's no longer true for Trump's America. There, it's actually Trump personalizing all decision-making.
Yes, but that doesn't mean that all your relationships, but we have transformed that into all our relationships. And secondly, on Op Sindoor, what has happened is that, Pakistan, which is a foreign policy, has become part of domestic policy.
It's always been.
Not to that extent. No, not to that extent. I mean, so today it is far more an aspect of domestic policy. I mean, look at the recent cricket matches. There's one tomorrow. I mean, all of you have seen the controversy about when the first one took place, the quarterfinal, when there was no shaking of hands after that, and then the second one where there was some more of, the Pakistani cricketer, the batsman, sort of putting his bat and all. So we've made it domestic policy, and it's not helpful. And as Javed reminded us, in the process of this personalized cult and wanting a seat at the big table, we forgot that your neighborhood is most important. And I think I mentioned last time when when we were talking about this somewhere, that, the world sees it. And if you can't manage your neighborhood, sorry, you are not going to be at the big table where the big boys are. अगर आप मोहल्ले के चौधरी नहीं हैं तो आप शहर के कोतवाल नहीं बन सकते. So सीधी बात.
So you're still feeling optimistic after all that? No, but look, here's a serious question. There are always perils to summit-driven diplomacy. It isn't just between India and the US, it's everywhere. Even India and Pakistan, every time they attempted this kind of summit-driven, is it the rapport between two leaders? Trump is still calling Modi a great guy. Nobody stopped calling the Indian Prime Minister a great person. But he makes the phone call on Prime Minister Modi's birthday, and 2 days later, he comes up with the H-1b announcement. Now, there are two views on how much this is something we should expend capital on, because, it's for every country to determine their own work visa policies and so on. But when you consider the fact that 71% of beneficiaries of the H-1b last year were Indians, that's more than 200,000 people, 191,000 the year before that, and it happens a day after you're making this phone call and everybody's calling it a thaw, it seems as if there's a sort of certain degree of gaslighting going on where you don't know whether you're coming or going with Trump. I mean, sorry to borrow from modern lexicon of relationships, but that's what it seems like.
So I think first on personality-driven politics. Now, at one level, of course, one can argue that it always makes sense to prepare things substantively and work the decision-making up and look at the broader convergence between countries and their interests. That having been said, one can't rule out that there are moments then where the leadership level interaction and leadership decisions make a huge difference. If I just take a look at the Civil Nuclear Cooperation Agreement between India and the US, which worked out in 2008, and in fact, that is the agreement that has completely transformed today the India-US relationship. Because it was following that agreement that restrictions on technology transfers between India and US have gradually eased off. And it's because of that, for example, that we have now bought almost $25 billion worth of defense supplies from the US. You're talking of partnership in critical and emerging technologies. But that Civil Nuclear Cooperation Agreement would not have worked if the US President George Bush had not put his personal influence on that process. It was, in fact, he who asked his administration when he became president that I want to improve the relationship with India. You tell me how to do it. His administration did a deep dive analysis and said that if you want to improve the relationship with India, you must do a civil nuclear cooperation agreement with India to ease up cooperation in civil nuclear technologies, because only after that you can ease up other kinds of technology restrictions. And when that agreement was being negotiated and all of us followed those processes, it ran into repeated obstacles at functional level of government on both sides. In India, there was a worry that by doing this agreement, are we surrendering our sovereignty? Will we become a vassal state of the United States? In the US, the argument was by doing this agreement, completely changing international norms, bringing India out of nuclear isolation, going against all the non-proliferation philosophies that US had articulated, is US compromising the entire non-proliferation process, and what is the benefit? And at each stage where it got stuck, it was George Bush and Prime Minister Manmohan Singh who stepped in to see it through. In fact, there was a no confidence motion in India, and the government in India had to survive that. So the role of leadership, one should not undermine. But it cannot be the only thing. You know, Trump, for example, tried to do a deal with North Korea, that he will do a leader-level engagement, or that I will talk to Putin and we'll get an agreement. If you see, he was caught on hot mic telling President Macron, can you imagine Trump is ready to do the agreement, Putin is ready to do the agreement because of me? No, he believes that. But, you know, in certain cases doesn't work. But other levels, I think the leader-level engagement and decision-making is important. So it has to be a mix of the two. So I would say just let's keep that aspect in mind.
Okay. Optimism still? You didn't answer that.
So I would say we are going through a difficult phase.
Yeah.
We'll come out of it. And we'll come out of it because there is a certain convergence between India and the US. That, for example, why has Trump softened some of his messaging?
Yeah.
Because he's come under criticism in the United States. That
Has he softened? It looked like he'd softened.
No,
Then he
I
did.
softened the messaging. Not the, I'll come on the H-1b. So softened the messaging. He has not as yet removed the tariffs, but he softened the messaging. He's come under criticism. Now, I also don't rule out that he's going to do a deal with China.
Yeah.
If you see in the March speech that Javed spoke about, where he spoke about Pakistan, there's not a single reference to China, which is very unusual because he has still not figured out what is the policy he wants on China. And so he raised tariffs, brought it down. They're negotiating the export controls. He's now allowed TikTok to continue in the United States. So he wants to do a deal with China. Now, even if he does a deal with China, the essence of an economic, technological, and military competition between US and China is here to stay. Because US is not saying that I'll become number 2 in the world. They still want to be number 1. Whether they remain or not, we'll see. But they want to be number 1. Now, if they want to win this technology game with China, they will need India as a partner. You know, in India today, as everyone knows, we have 1,800 global capability centers doing also cutting-edge R&D and technology development work for global multinationals, including US companies. 20% of the global talent in semiconductor design is based in India. And just one more example before I stop. We don't have jet engine technology. One of the leading US companies on jet engines employs 8,000 people just in Bengaluru doing cutting-edge R&D and technology development work for jet engines.
So you're saying, and I want to take that to Ambassador Ashraf in a second, you're saying that even if his priority is no longer the sort of containment of China, he will continue to see China as a competitor.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, and just one on H-1b.
Sure.
H-1b is not a new thing. I think, Javed, when did you leave US 2012-13? And so we were both there.
Yeah.
When H-1b had become a hot political issue.
Yeah.
And at that time, they had raised the H-1b fees 3 times. So it goes up and down because there is a perception in the US, whether it's justified or
that
not.
they're being misused.
They're misused, replace American workers. And one big example was that one Indian company had brought in 250 people hired by Disney. And Disney had used the Americans who were being replaced to train the Indians. So that's the kind of thing that keeps
So my
up.
question remains on H-1b, on how exercised we should get on it, how much capital we should spend on it. But just before that, this idea of, you said we over-signaled on the Quad. If you know, we're all waiting for this new security doctrine that's supposed to come out. God knows if Trump even knows what's in it or cares. The question is this: if China is no longer if Trump is thinking of a G2 world, even if he's competing a bit with China, this idea of India as a countervailing force to China seems very yesteryear. If that idea is very yesteryear, why is India relevant to the United States of America? I'm just asking the obvious question.
I think first of all, we reflexively treat foreign policy as either we are in this camp or that camp.
Correct.
Just cannot understand where this comes from and why 75 years after independence we continue to reflexively think in those terms. My problem with the way I've worked for 15 years on the US relation on every aspect, so I understand its importance for our national transformation, if not necessarily for our security. Security in operational terms, in capacity building certainly. Sure. My problem was that we overemphasized the strategic dimension of the relationship to a point where it became the cornerstone of our security architecture. We neglected Russia. We overemphasized and amplified our conflicts with China. You cannot continue to live in a state of active conflict and heightened tension with a major power, which is a neighbor, which today accounts for 35% of global manufacturing output. The remaining next 10 are 37%, which dominates 40 out of the 44 key technology areas, controls 75% of the commanding heights of the 21st century. So we ended up in a situation where we also were pretty disdainful towards Europe. We cannot say things in public, we need partners, not preachers. Right? So it was also this situation. So when the over-leveraged relationship hit a turbulent spot, we suddenly found ourselves scampering. And then...
So we leaned in too much?
No, it's not a question. This tangent, we should have gone there. SCO, for all its contradiction, it covers the entire Eurasian landmass from the Pacific to the Eurasian border.
Yeah.
How can you not be there and not participate in it, even if it makes somebody angry? How can you not be part of BRICS, even if it makes somebody angry? Those choices are our sovereign choices.
Agreed.
Right? My experience with the US has always been, you draw your red line, they start softening up after some time. If there is a perception that you can be pushed a bit into accommodation, then they will keep pushing you. It's not amoral. It is the nature of business in foreign policy.
So you're saying in agreeing not to buy oil from Iran, in maybe appearing far too keen to invest in this relationship?
I think so, because if that is the case, then what do you get in return? Now, let me ask you a question. The fundamental sometimes conflicts, I'll give you two examples. Every time either Ambassador Juster or Garcetti or someone from Congress who would come to Paris, they would come to see me. Now, Ambassador Garcetti asked me last year, he says, you've done this for a very long time. What will it take for us to fight wars together, for example, in Taiwan? I mean, this is where we need to go. Or people asking me, what will it take for India to be like Australia, Japan, and Korea? Perception, management. So when Ambassador Sood and Ambassador Alok Prasad joined Jaswant Singh for that 14, 16 rounds of Stroop-Talbot dialogue, we were at a crossroad. Yeah. We could have taken one of confrontation or of engagement. But they negotiated the new terms of engagement between India and the United States, which, within less than 2 years of punitive sanctions, led to a 5-day, 5-city visit by President Clinton, and then the normalization of that relationship. We're at that point where we need to do a realistic appraisal and do what terms of engagement we need to have with the United States. A crisis can be an opportunity to reset your whole geopolitical vision. You cannot convey the impression that you will jump over your entire extended neighborhood to seek security from a distant friend and partner with fickle mind who, because of its global calculus, can make very, very sharp U-turns. That is vulnerability. So your vulnerability against China cannot become a vulnerability against the United States. So my problem since this discourse has started in the past few months has been this reflexive either or situation. We will get the relationship with the United States going again. I mean, there will be a landing spot. I just hope that what President Trump seeks, which is an open admission that in deference to US wishes, we will not buy oil from from Russia. Will not happen. And that we will find some landing ground in which they will also realize India is not Europe or Japan that can be pushed over or they will roll over. And then we start negotiating new terms. And I can see realism is already hitting it. You mentioned, Barkha, about technology.
Yeah.
We made such a huge issue about an old engine, which is of an old architecture, old metallurgy, built in the 80s and 90s, for which you are not you're only getting manufacturing TOT for 60%. They're not even giving you 80%. So when you signal this as a great achievement of India-US relations, you are setting the bar too low, because that is a technology crutch that will leave you in perpetual state of dependency. But so I'm astonished for a country that has also made Rolls-Royce engine for Jaguars in the same way, or AL-31 engines for Sukhoi 30. We are getting this old engine, and we used to be screaming headlines in every newspaper, G414 and 404, and they can switch off. There's no sovereign control. And manufacturing TOT teaches you how to assemble a furniture. It doesn't teach you how to design and develop a solution which Russia, to some extent, has offered and France has offered. But we were deferential towards the United States and we didn't pick up the French offer.
Okay, let me take a couple of comments from both of you, but I'm sure the audience has some questions. The audience has some questions as well. Do we
I just wanted to add one point to what Javed said about sovereignty here. See, I don't know, it was mentioned in one of the earlier comments how long Pakistan has been an ally. And this is, Pakistan was a member of SEATO and CENTO, two US-led military alliances, for a number of years. It joined these alliances in the 50s. And there have been these ups and downs in US-Pakistan relationship. And Barkha had asked about the about the Pakistan-Saudi recent agreement. India has, never been an ally and has never offered these kind of security assurances to any country. So it's a little difficult, but once you've been an ally, once you have been a dependent, once you have exhibited that kind of dependence, you can also be a gun for hire. It comes more easily. It's much more difficult for us. We've never, because an ally of the United States, now we know who is a junior partner and who's the senior partner. You can't be an equal. And what we have tried to do with the US is a partnership, not an alliance. And therefore it is also equally difficult. You think the Saudis could have come to us and said, look, will you do a security agreement with us? No, we would never have done it. They would never even consider it. Because that's contrary to our 75 years of foreign policy.
Yeah.
So once you've been a dependent ally, you can also be a gun for hire for somebody else. It just depends on the price.
No, in fact, I wanted to point out to a very interesting episode in our India-US relations. This is the 2003 Iraq War. And, by March they attacked, by May they declared victory. And then they approached us and they said the new symbol of India-US strategic partnership is to send troops. And guess where they were sending us the troops to? They said, "You will give you Mosul," which ultimately became the ISIS capital. You know, every foreign policy correspondent in India was in support.
Are you serious?
I have those articles still, including one redoubtable editor who wrote an op-ed on 1st July 2003. Well, the foreign secretary and we were going to, because MEA was opposed to it, I was then also in America's division, Indian fossilized service. That Indian fossilized service is just, you're objecting to it and they're looking backwards. But our political establishment, and this is the point he was making, whether it was the political writers, they were all universally opposed to it. The ones who are political writers. Yeah. The opposition party, led by Ms. Sonia Gandhi, were opposed to it. I went also for the CCS meeting. And after all the debate, the Prime Minister, then Shri Atal Bihari Vajpayee, asked a very basic question. He said, after there was this very stormy debate, what happens if our soldiers have to fire on our Iraqi brothers? And what happens if they fire on our soldiers? There was no answer, and he said, let it be. This is not our game. ये हमारा खेल नहीं है. इसको रहने दीजिए. You know, and it, to me, as then young officer, was a great insight into the political debate that also shaped some very core foreign policy issues in the country. And therefore, that self-conception and strategic autonomy is so deeply ingrained in us. And you know, you mentioned these 2 points I wanted to, because Saloni had mentioned this in the beginning, and we should have brought this up. See, I've served with, you know, 2 successive prime ministers for equal time, so there's this complete non-partisanship there. But I wanted to say that I think personalities matter, but in the age of information technology and where everyone is receiving real-time information, even in domestic politics, parties have become almost irrelevant to the personality of individual leaders at different levels. Yeah. So now you have a president of the United States, still the most powerful country, negotiating with himself on social media. Because he doesn't negotiate with the others. He wakes up, he decides what he has to say. So personalities will become even more pronounced. You see that even in the European system, who are traditionally very subdued people. Yeah. But you see, it's beginning to take place because of this constant barrage of social media. And I thought it was a very important point in how it is shaping foreign policy in a big way.
There's so much to talk about that we can't cover ground on everything. Yeah. Can I get a quick closing thought from you? Because I do want to spend at least 10 minutes seeing if anyone has questions.
So I just wanted to repeat a sentence I had made in one of your programs. Yeah. When the US makes these demands that, you know, don't buy from Russia or whatever. Yeah. So if we are to tell the United States that don't have a relationship with Pakistan because it is a supporter of terrorism, will the United States do that? Exactly. They won't. Yeah. Because they will determine their relationship with Pakistan based on their assessment of their interests. Absolutely. So whatever relationship we build, including with Russia, has to be based on our assessment of our interests, not because of what US or Europe says.
100%. I think that's what so many Americans in media especially don't get, that this is about sovereignty and it's not an economic debate, but it's about the right to decide for yourself. And that's...
But you know, since independence, you've had this problem with this issue with the US. You know, John Foster Dulles said, if you are not with us, then you are immoral. you know, and that was the beginning genesis of the strain in what had promised to be a great partnership between 2 democracies at the birth of India's independence. Is this notion that you have to be either with us or the dichotomy that we were speaking about. How do you deal with a country that is so multi-layered and nuanced? Yeah. And that, after 25 years of transformation, hasn't yet fully sunk in at every level. And that's always going to be a tension.
Okay. We have about maybe a few minutes to take questions. Yes? I don't see the mics. Let's start here. If you could just raise your hand because we can't see you otherwise. Let's start there in the white shirt. Yes, sir. Yeah.
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
To all the ambassadors, we started by saying Trump is a transactional leader or president. So if he is a transactional leader or a businessman, he must think game theory. What are the chips that India has right now?
Good question. Who wants to take that? Ambassador Sood?
Well,
Take the mic.
I think I kind of hinted at it, and as did Javed when he talked of technology and the aircraft engine example about the GE 404 and 414 and the potential with other players in the market, whether the Russians or the French. But I think that one of the things that I said was that if you are seen as, you've neglected your neighborhood. I mean, see what has happened to your neighborhood over the last 3, 4, 5 years after declaring a neighborhood first policy. So if you are seen as weak, then that's part of the problem. So you will first have to, before you start repairing your relationship and finding security with outside partners, I think you first have to ensure your own periphery. And I think Javed or Arun also talked about the fact that did we oversell the India-US sort of partnership? Did it have an impact on the China angle? Could we have sorted out what happened in Galwan faster than, I mean, even now it is not sorted out to that extent. After all, we've only just disengaged. We haven't undertaken any de-escalation. We haven't undertaken any de-induction. So, and we've also undertaken a lot of economic steps which are now being restored with renewed pilgrimages and now flights and all the rest of it. So, would it have been better had we not overplayed into that thing? I mean, so while I accept this whole personality thing to an extent with social media, but I do think that, I think we just went a little bit overboard on this. And and we needed to be we need to do some recalibration, beginning with your neighborhood. I mean, what is the point of, you keep saying, no, terror and talks will not go together, blood and water will not flow together. I mean, you know, you are neighbors. We know we've been to wars with them. But if we as the bigger country can't manage our relationship, I'm not saying that you can solve Kashmir or any such thing, but if we can't manage our relationship, I mean, it's all very well to say that I don't want external powers interfering in my neighborhood. But if your neighborhood is becoming a fractured space, then external powers will intervene. And you will, and you know, then the perception will be that you are weaker than what you project yourself to be.
I mean, the short answer is that there are no great chips except to first clean your immediate space.
No, I think you have some chips in the sense that the US, one, will not want to lose India. Because it doesn't make sense. There is still, despite all those challenges, it's a large country. And if their main competitor is China, then which is the other country with 1.4 billion people? And there is a recognition in the US, among US companies, that to maintain their global leadership in innovation in many areas, the India partnership is useful. So I think that's what we'll have to play with.
Well, first of all, I think President Trump has no idea about game theory. So, I mean, Sunil, I know that you are a topper from IIT Delhi, and when, you know, and I am Ahmedabad. So, but you know, don't attribute to President Trump the same level of intellectual caliber that you have. No, his life revolves around a new doctrine in domestic politics and foreign policy, which is called the grievance doctrine. So, you know, everything is that people have stolen from us. The allies are freeloaders. Rules are fetters, not frameworks. Tax is not revenue. It is punishment and retribution. So this is the philosophy with which he's operating. What are our chips? One, I think, is that whatever happens, the United States sees the world in these terms of either us or with them. So that one photograph from Tanjin of the three leaders
Correct.
together, President Xi, Prime Minister, and President Putin, went, I mean, top of the news in the United States. And suddenly everyone, including the Republicans, was saying, wait a minute, are we going to lose India to the new formation? And what will it do to the United States? So the more we exercise strategic autonomy, the more we will have chips. Second, we will need to find ways in which we can find a convergent landing point. They will also soften their position on trade. We will also have to continue to engage. It may be a slow process. I know that we have offered to increase our purchases of energy. We have made maybe the most ambitious trade offer that we have ever done to the United States. I've also spent nights talking about poultry and dairy and things. And that should be a starting point in which we can work with them. Defense is a tricky business because you can't keep buying 10 billion, 5 billion every year. And it is my firm conviction that you cannot buy core combat systems from a country with the kind of export control laws that they have and the export control history that they have. So the chips that we have really is about how we deal with the neighborhood and the rest of the major powers, and what we can do in terms of our ability to bridge that deficit. Now, on H-1b, I think there is a separate issue. H-1b must be divided into two parts. There are H-1b requirements of US companies. And then there is 20% of the H-1b goes to Indian companies that send people there, right? And then, and they also use L1 visa, which is intercorporate transfers. So H-1b is going to, first of all, hit the American companies in terms of their, so some of them may be forced to try and find GCC locations over here. What we have to do while we negotiate, and I make this point repeatedly, is to protect the market share of our key sectors, which means that textiles, garments, leather goods, gems and jewelries, these are highly substitutable products. They can go from one country to another. So think of it as a pandemic-like situation, a COVID-like situation, and say that, okay, for the next 5-6 months, I'm going to protect the market share of my industries so that they are able to, that's the starting point we should work on. And in any case, nobody cares about WTO rules anymore in the world, starting with the United States. So we can subsidize that. That's, I think, gives us some negotiating space and leverage, and while we continue to do it. But remember that, you know, we should not feel that because we don't have the same leverage as China, that we are not in a position to negotiate. If you are clear about red lines on trade and on your sovereign choices, at some point, there will be an accommodation process that will begin. Clearly, we have given the most ambitious offer. Maybe we will adjust a little bit more on the agriculture, a little bit more on some of the small-scale sector. We may buy a little bit more of energy. Gradually, I suspect, and I hope it doesn't happen, we will start reducing our imports of energy from Russia. I mean, that would then lead to maybe excessive demand. And remember, what has the EU gained, or what did Japan gain from? They lost a prime minister, lost a seat. Yeah. And today they are saying, okay, this is what we want. Tomorrow he'll say that, you know, don't tax my digital companies, my Googles and my others. If you levy taxes in India on them, I'm going to impose new tariffs. So you are dealing with a situation where it is not, remember, it is not the relationship that is important. it is your interest. National interests are paramount, not the relationship. If a relationship needs to be, in a sense, let go of for a time being because your national interests determine it, then you need to be able to have the nerves to stay the course and go through with it. And then things will come around. The logic of India-US relations exists, but it has to be put in the right framework.
Okay, I'm going to take a couple of questions together because I think we're kind of running late now. So here, yeah, I'm going to take 3 questions together and then have maybe a round of last comments. Yeah.
Right. Thank you very much. Very enlightening evening discussion. One country that we haven't mentioned at all in today's evening is Israel. I'd love to have an opinion from the ambassadors on that.
Yeah. Can I take a couple of more questions from the floor and then I'll, yeah. At the back, if you could just maybe stand up, we can get you the mic. Yeah.
Ideally, I would have loved to ask the eminent ambassadors to rate the performance of Indian diplomacy versus Pakistani diplomacy, but I think it would be unfair to subject you to this particular pain. But on a serious note, if we take a step back, recently we have seen the two, I would say the two services act, the Indian diplomacy versus Pakistani diplomacy. How do you, if you take a step back, rate?
How do you look at it?
Yeah, that was one. The second point was, how do you rate their PR versus ours? Maybe with their Goebbelian propaganda, but somewhere I think they have been able to sort of get their message around. You alluded to the point that in the global capitals, sometimes they are now looking at India a little differently. Is this because of this propaganda that now we have the NATO chief also sort of trying to put words in our mouth, trying to tell us what did we tell Putin? So somewhere I think some position of strength has got a weakened there somewhere.
Okay, one more question there at the back. Piche de dijiye mic. Thank you.
Thank you. My quick question is around the fact that maybe we are kind of focusing on where the puck is right now, while we should also look at where the puck is going. So I think what we're seeing with technology is that intelligence has been pretty much democratized, and then I think the next wave is robotics. And if you look at it, if you just extend a little bit, you will start to see that the scale of production and everything is going to be very much tilting towards who has the technology and a disproportionate advantage to technology. And that's why inputs, which is the resources, and outputs, which is actually access to markets, is where the world is literally shifting towards. These are just the signs of what we are seeing in terms of really access to the market and access to inputs, where the puck is going.
Okay.
So I would love that.
Okay, because these are going to be closing comments from our guests, I'll take one more question there. Yes. Just stand up so we can get to the mic. Yeah.
So the rise in anti-immigration sentiment has been going on for a while, but I think what personally surprised... Immigration sentiment. But I think what has surprised me over the last few months is how India-specific it seems to be becoming. With the recent protests in Australia, a similar one in London, and so on. Do you see this as a threat and any strategic implications for the country that we should be thinking about?
Okay, may I request all our 3 guests to make these your closing remarks? So factor in a little bit of what you've heard from the floor, but also where do you see the next, Ambassador Ashraf is saying, think it's like COVID, 6 months, hunker down, protect yourselves, and then reevaluate. So Israel, I'll start with you, and closing comments also overall, please.
What specifically?
Well, I mean, you had most of the UN walking out. There's a sense that Trump has got somewhat exasperated with Netanyahu. He's now, having failed on Russia, Ukraine, thinks he can bring Gaza to a close. Is now sitting around with this bunch of Pakistan, Turkey, Saudi Arabia. Something is clearly sort of going on in that head of his. So last comments.
So, all right. So I think in Israel, we are nowhere near a solution. And we have to all be prepared for the fact that the challenges there and the conflict is likely to continue. And the reason is that what the Israelis are doing in Gaza clearly is terrible. Yeah. But the Israelis have convinced themselves that they don't have a partner on the Palestinian side. Now, right or wrong? And they have convinced themselves that in the past, whenever they tried to do an agreement, the Palestinian partner eventually did not accept the agreement. And so in 2000, for example, when under Bill Clinton, they offered to Yasser Arafat all of West Bank and Gaza minus 4%, and where the major Israeli settlements were, and there would be compensatory 4% given to the Palestinian entity from area that is recognized as Israel. And eventually Yasser Arafat did not accept that. A similar offer was made in 2008. So over time, politics in Israel has shifted to the right, and the dominant political elite in Israel today believes that any Palestinian structure will pose a challenge to the existence of Israel. Therefore, their whole strategy at the moment, over time, is to completely do away with the possibility of a Palestinian state. And Netanyahu has said that publicly. But the fact is that you have more than 5 million Palestinians living there. And if Israel says it wants to be a Jewish and a democratic state, then it has to carve out the Palestinian population in some way. Because if you're democratic, then you can't be Jewish. And if you're Jewish, then, with 5-6 million Palestinians living there, you can't be democratic. So that's the challenge that they are facing. And unfortunately, they have linked their strategies to the most powerful country in the world.
Yeah.
After all, how was this state of Israel created? Because they were supported by then the most powerful country in the world, the UK. And today, the most powerful country in the world, the United States, for whatever reason we can go into that, is completely behind Israel. So Israel can get away. On Pakistan, I'll just say this, that whenever Pakistan is seen as doing well for other reasons, there is a sense in India that is our diplomacy failing in some sense. But whenever you read the Pakistani press, you'll always find that Indian diplomacy is succeeding very well. When you read the press here, ISI is creating havoc here. Yeah. When you read the Pakistani press, RNW is creating havoc in Pakistan. So it's got nothing to do with, we are both very similar people. We are both as good or as bad. But it's just that the situation changes, and at some times they're doing better. So.
Okay, I'll give it to Ambassador Ashraf, and then Rakesh can close it for us. Yeah.
Well, I think on the Israel question, I mean, my only thing is that we have to also very carefully evaluate the positions we take as government of India and as the country. Because a lot of our foreign policy, this is the other problem we haven't discussed, and maybe for another session, is got very deeply intertwined with domestic politics. Yes. And that narrows our space in taking reasoned and decisions, and that actually sometimes makes our space narrower, but also gives us, it doesn't give us enough freedom and leeway to, on the foreign policy issues, whether it's in our neighborhood or whether it is Israel or or even with regard to the United States. The second question on Pakistan diplomacy, Indian diplomacy, look, they have a single point agenda, which is us, which is India. I mean, we have a far more complex and a more positive agenda, which is, if I were to borrow the concept from management, which is the Maslow need hierarchy, then I would, at some point, I want to write about Maslow's need hierarchy and foreign policy. And so we have a very different layers of foreign policy objectives. And as I said that, you're looking at it through the prism of how our relationship with the United States is working or not working. I would say that we have to look at it through the prism of how we are able to show resilience, flexibility, nimbleness, and capacity to adjust to developing situations in advancing our national interests, whether it is in the nature of our economic transformation, security, our global position, etc. So that's, so it's very easy for us to start fretting about this sort of a thing. On the very important question of technology, I think you're absolutely right. Each age of this world has been shaped by technology. The first industrial revolution brought Britain to the fore, the second brought Europe, the third led to America's dominance in the world, and the fourth industrial revolution, which is unfolding, is leading to a yet unsettled question whether it's going to be China and the United States. I have a different take on this. I think our industry is absolutely abominable when it comes to innovation, even the IT sector, which the most triumphantly we talk about the great capabilities we have. We have brilliant young minds. We just need to, and they think boldly, not the legacy companies of the past. They are still caught up in the 20th century ideas. So we often blame the government about where we are, but you just look at your industries. You look at your corporate sector, look at your R&D expenditure, it is less than 1% of the GDP, of which 0.7% is accounted for by government. These are abysmal situations. For as a country to prosper and to be that sense of, in a fluid world of changes, you have two things to decide on: coalition building, capacity building. Coalition building is going to be uncertain, so you need a diversified portfolio of investments, as you would in a volatile financial market, but you need capacity building. And I think that's where the current emphasis of the government on Atmanirbharta is not just about an economic choice, it's also about a strategic imperative. And so technology will definitely have a very important bearing on the course of who will be in the driver's seat in the 21st century. So I think that was a very important point. Just to conclude in a way, I think that everywhere in the world, there is chaos and turmoil. This happens when one order is transitioning into another order. We know that we are leaving the global order that we were familiar with for 75 years. We don't know what we are getting into. This is going to be a period of turmoil, turbulence, uncertainty, volatility. How we deal with this is the real test of political wisdom and leadership. It isn't about fixed ideas about this relationship or that relationship. And this is actually once in an era-defining moment. Think of it this way. For the first time in 300 years, the largest economy in purchasing power terms is not an English-speaking, Western, market, liberal democracy. Think of it, what impact it has had on the order. So we will also have to adjust. Our challenge is going to be whether our political vision and our diplomatic skills are able to steer us through these choppy waters.
Okay, Ambassador Sood.
Well, I think I would agree with Arun's assessment in terms of Israel. Incidentally, there again you have this great bond of friendship between Modi and Netanyahu. You remember those pictures, walking together barefoot on the beach kind of thing. On the India-Pakistan diplomacy, I would agree with both what Arun said and as Javed amplified it in terms of the single point agenda, and therefore much easier to, at a personal level, I have had good relationships with some Pakistani diplomats and continue to have those relationships. So that's not an issue. So having been in Pakistan, served, lived there and so on. Coming to the technology thing, I think what is interesting is that what you are seeing today, the turbulence, which was the title of our talk here. We've talked of geopolitics, and we have seen what Javed mentioned just recently. He said WTO is dead. So rules of trade that lent predictability since GATT was created till now, that period is over. I mean, tariffs is now used, there is now a new kind of license. Earlier, the US, incidentally, when the US started using secondary sanctions, that again was something which was arbitrary. I mean, it was, US would have its own export controls, but then it would impose, I mean, the reason why we stopped buying oil from Iran was because of secondary sanctions. Because the US said, we won't buy, but if we catch you buying, and then your dollar issues, etc., etc. So either we ring fence it, or you give up buying that. So the same kind of a solution has to be figured out. So it depends on how you structure it. But it was the US. But today, the geoeconomics or the global trading system, as exemplified by the WTO, that is dead. So two massive tides of change. Now, coincidentally, these two massive tides of change are happening at the same time when you are also seeing the Industrial Revolution. And this Industrial Revolution, which is another massive tide of change, which is why you have this great uncertainty, and this technological tide of change is different from what was there earlier. Because earlier, what you saw was a bipolar world. But today, what you are seeing is there are two technological giants emerging. And these are essentially the US and China. In the new and emerging technologies, whether it is quantum, whether it is space, whether it is synthetic biology, whether it is biotech, and all of these things put together. So there you are getting a question as to, will these technologies be fungible? Will we end up having to make choices about what we use? Because the American model, their digital technologies, or as I call it, the age of digital networks, because what we are seeing is both A, the miniaturization, the digitalization of economies and all that, and B, the connectivity, which is becoming faster and faster. So it is becoming digital networks which are driving us. Whether these are going to, how do the two systems communicate with each other, and if they don't, then we see a very different kind of a world. And these are some questions that I don't think anybody today knows the answers to, which is perhaps why it keeps diplomats like us in business.
Okay, we do have to close on that note. All I'll say in the end is that this was the opposite of a fossilized service. These were the best and brightest minds that you could get to talk about this. A lot of questions, not so many answers. The one thing I think everybody agrees on is sovereignty, national interest, strategic autonomy. The rest, I think, as Saloni said in the beginning, whether you want to call it Kali Yuga or Trump's Yuga or a new world order, it's coming. Constant change is inevitable, and it all depends on how strong and resilient you are in the face of change. Can we have a big round of applause for our fantastic panel? Thank you so much.